Hey, Godspeak family. It's great to be here on this Saturday night, be able to share God's word. And please, as Maddie was sharing, our teams that are going back and forth, really being involved with ministry in Uganda. There's a great work going on there that Pastor Craig invested 14 years of his life, him and his wife Lauren. And it's an incredible work. And if you go there, mission work in Uganda is like dog years. So if you're there 1 year, it's like 7 years, meaning that the sickness and the disease they almost lost a child who had typhoid and malaria at the same time. No. Yellow fever and malaria no, something else. The diseases are like that. It's just like constant. And so when they go and come back, it's very life-changing because you see these people that have absolutely nothing but Jesus, and they're filled with joy. And you come back to America, and people have everything, and they're a sad, depressed, discontent people. And it's always a startling thing. You have to readjust when you come back from the mission field because of the bizarre social, emotional, spiritual dynamics that happen inside of you. Anyway, it's a great work going over there, so please be praying for them. If you need a Bible, raise your hand. Our servants team, they're building their biceps. They got some Bibles in their hand. It's Saturday night. Everybody brings their Bible, right? You're making your way to Genesis chapter 11. If you have your Bible, Genesis chapter 11, as we look at our message, The Chaos of Babylon. All right, we need one right here. Okay, we are going to finish the epic part of the book of Genesis, which is the first part. Chapters 1 through 11 have 4 major worldview shaping events that take place. Chapter 1 and 2, you have the creation of God supernaturally creating the world from his perspective, from his word, from his authority in 6 days. Does the world out there believe that? No. But Genesis 1 and 2 teaches that. Then Genesis 3, we see the fall of man. Why have you been struggling this week with temptations, thoughts, desires? Because Adam ruined our life, right? Adam and Eve, they took of the knowledge of good and evil. Their eyes were opened. Why are we going to a funeral maybe later this week? Because sin entered the world. Sin, sickness, disease, and death. The Lord told them, if you eat of this fruit, in dying you shall surely die. It's like a double death. First you're going to die spiritually, and then you're going to die physically. The spiritual death began immediately for Adam and Eve. They get kicked out of the garden. Not only are Adam and Eve fallen in their own sinful nature, which we inherited through genetics, but also the world around now is growing thorns and thistles, and to make things work, they got to earn or eat their bread by the sweat of their brow. It was easy before. No sprinkler system, just a mist. No weeds, just fruit. They had to tend some things. Clip, 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 break time. It's like easy living for them. And yet after they're kicked out of the garden and after the fall. So, creation, the fall, Noah's flood. Noah's flood changed the geography of the earth. Most of the fossils are because of a catastrophic global flood that took place. And the fourth major event that shapes a Christian's worldview, and as we look at history and look at the authenticity of God's historic record of the scriptures, we see the Tower of Babel. Why is the Tower of Babel significant? Because all the people of the earth, after the flood, the boat lands on Mount Ararat. Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth come out. They begin to repopulate the earth. The population grows, and the Lord tells them, as we'll see in a moment, to spread out and take dominion over the earth. He blessed them, be fruitful, multiply, but be scattered around the earth to establish dominion. But mankind didn't want to do that. Mankind wanted to be rebels. But the thing they had going for them was you are created in the image of God, and they're brilliant. And they all spoke one language. There's no language barriers in the entire population of the earth. Well, think about it. Noah and his 3 boys come out, and they populate the earth. They all speak the same language. So the entire population of the earth speaks one language, and their technology excels, and we're going to see as soon as people get together and reject God's plan, they're going to implement their own plan. C.S. Lewis said there's only two kinds of people in this world. Two kinds of people. Those who say, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and my will be done on earth as I want it to be. So there's only two groups of people on the planet. They got lots of different names and titles and descriptions. Bottom line is there are people that are wanting to live in a relationship with God in the order of that relationship with God and the peace that it brings. And there are those who reject God, rebel against God, and create chaos and havoc for their life and lose peace and lose touch with real love and lose peace with joy. But the one sounds like it's very exciting. Some people just like chaos. Some people like peace. The Bible is a story of the tale of two cities. The city of Jerusalem, the city of peace, that represents all of God's people having a relationship with him, and the city of Babylon that starts here in it's mentioned in chapter 10, Babel, and now in chapter 11 we get a greater description of what takes place. And their fearless rebel leader was a guy by the name of Nimrod. Nimrod's name means, when his dad named him, Cush named him, he said, let us rebel. Now, who wants to name a kid, let us rebel? Well, it would fit in his teenage years, right? But Nimrod went on to be the first tyrant of world history to set up two societies in the valley of Shinar, Babylon and Nineveh, that were in opposition to a relationship with God. That being said, let's read the first few verses to get us going. Let's read verses 1 through 4 as we look at the plans of man fail. In verse 1 it says, now the whole earth had one language and one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar. Shinar means the area of two rivers, land of two rivers. We have the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. And they dwelt there. Then they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. The plans of man that we see in verses 1 through 4 describes their plan that was the exact opposite of what God asked them to do. And since they're going to pursue something that's opposite of God's plan, the plans of man just fail. I mean, you just have to ask yourself, what kind of life do you want to have? One that is experiencing the success, and I mean success by being, the definition, being in the center of God's will, or do you want your plans to fail? Anytime you set up your life on a course that is in direct opposition to God's plans, will it go well for you? No. You try to tell your kids that growing up. Right? You're trying to train them as they're growing up. Like if you would I would have this conversation with my kids. We're getting ready to go. We're going to go on vacation and be in a car for 6 hours. Who does that to themselves? With little kids, right? He touched me. He took my pee. It's like just 6 hours. Are we there yet? And I would tell my kids, like they're, 5 and 7, 8 years old. You guys, this is going to be an amazing vacation. It's going to be an amazing drive. If you'll just simply do what Dad asked you to do, right? That seems pretty simple. And they both nod. You're not in the car 5 minutes, right? Wow, he's on my side. He's on my side. He touched me. He stuck his tongue out at me. That's why they designed bucket seats so a dad's arm could reach behind and swap both behinds at the same time. But the peace is directly in correlation to responding to the direction of your Father. And this is true in life. So I want you to notice some things that really stand out within this passage of Scripture. As I said, these are the 4 major events. We have the creation, we have the fall of man, we have the great flood, and now we have the Tower of Babel. But the rest of the book of Genesis that we'll look at together from chapter 12 to 50, it contains 4 major characters: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. This is the way the book of Genesis is broken up. But here, as we see this take place, they're journeying, they're in unity, and it says in verse 1, the whole earth had one language, one speech. That would be great, right? I flew this week, had kind of a urgent flight to go help some people in ministry, flew Wednesday night, so I'm in the airport, LAX, and then I fly back last night, get home like at midnight, and everywhere we go in these airports, because of the multinational dynamic of our culture, there's all these different languages, right? You hear these 2 people talking. I always try to guess what people are talking, what their language is, maybe where they're from, and there's no way. And then I listened to a guy for a while, and I thought, oh, he's speaking a foreign language. But as I kind of slowed down, he was just speaking with a strong accent so fast that he is actually speaking English. It took me about 15 minutes to start following the words. Imagine you're just all speaking the same language. There's not a problem. So yeah, communication brings unity, all right? Unity in communication can be used for evil, or it can be used for good. So they're one speech, one language. They're in harmony. They come to the land of Shinar, which, as I said, is the land of 2 rivers. It's called the Fertile Crescent because of these rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. And 2 of those rivers were 2 of the 4 rivers that flowed out of the Garden of Eden. And so we're not sure where the Garden of Eden was before the flood. The topography changed, but we only have 2 of the rivers and not the other 2. But notice that their heart was, come let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They had come up with a technology back then. When you have unity of heart with a rebel spirit, Nimrod is their leader basically, which means let us rebel against God. Says he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, which meant he was hunting the souls of men and shaking his fist at God. Before the Lord, you think about people that are totalitarian regimes, they're crushing people. Don't they ever look up and think of God one day they're going to stand before him? But he was doing it as if he was shaking his fist in God's face. And as he comes together, they have new technology. And this new technology they're going to use to build a monument to their rebellion. We live in a technology age, don't we? The big hoorah for the last years, like AI's coming to get you. AI, right? And so artificial intelligence is a terrifying thing. They already know all your data. Ladies, they know your shopping habits, right? Amazon. They know the makeup you like. They know what size your shoe is. They know all of this stuff, right? Because they're harvesting all your data. They can describe your life down to a T. They go to Starbucks every morning at 6:46. Right? They got your, and so AI is just going to take all of that information with an algorithm and say, if we're going to want to do this to Sally, this is what we should start pumping towards her social media and all these different things. And all of a sudden, you're like, wow, this is amazing. It's like the whole internet's designed for me. AI could be used for good, or it could be used for evil in this communication. Modern technology is neutral. It's neither here nor there. Money is neutral. People say money's evil. No, the Bible says the love of money is evil, the root of all evil. The love of it, not money. Money's neutral. I can give to help an orphan, or I can go buy a gram of Coke. Right? It's neutral. I'm sorry I used that illustration. My old life, comes back every now and then. So, I don't know why I say these things sometimes. You're all healed, but the scars are still there. No, let's just move on. But modern technology, this was their modern technology. They had discovered the technology of kilns, right? First, they discovered how to sun-dry clay into hard things or brick. And then they go, oh no, if we extra heat it, we heat it in ovens, kilns, then it's hard brick. This technology is way back then. The whole narrative of the worldview of evolution is people are like apes that came, dragging their knuckles out of caves. And then slowly language. Adam, the very first man, was created in the image of God, and Adam was brilliant. Not only was he brilliant, but he lives to be 930 years old. So how much wisdom do you gain? He gives names to all the animals. Right? Why? I have a question for him. Why the platypus? What grabbed you for the Adam was brilliant. Eve was brilliant. Mankind is created in the image of a brilliant God, and he reflects that in us. So you'll see that as a reference from God's perspective about mankind with the unity of their language, the unity of their purpose for rebellion against God. They're using this modern technology not to somehow serve God in a greater way. No, they want to use this modern technology for what? That's right. Thank you for answering that. Verse 4, they said, come, let us build. Build what? Ourselves. Let us build a name. And what are we going to build? We're going to build a city, first of all. Then we're going to build a tower. And we're going to call it the Eiffel Tower. We're going to call it the Trump Towers. We're going to call it the Towers. Why? Because we love to build monuments to ourselves, right? Doesn't matter what it is. We want to put our name on it. The Sears Tower. Has anything changed in mankind? No. We're still heating up bricks and building things and putting our name on it. We're going to make a name for ourselves. Not only are we going to build a city, build a tower that reaches into the heavens. Why into the heavens? Now, in this region, they have discovered ziggurats. Ziggurats are similar to a pyramid that they build, and they keep having recessive elevations as they build up. So on top, it is thought, though obviously we don't have one functioning today, though there's ruins of ziggurats, that they built a place of worshiping the stars, worshiping the heavens, worshiping anything but the true and living God, right? They want to be pantheists, which means God is in everything. He's in the rocks, he's in the trees. No, God created all those things. God is not a rock. God is not a tree. Polytheism, there's the God of the mountains and the God of the valleys and all of these gods that begin to come out of Greek mythology, and Romans basically just took the Greek mythology and all of their gods and changed their names and all of the false gods and worship, because you see the heart and soul of Babylon, where all of this took place, that the center of all pagan religion originated here. Just like true religion is associated with a different city, Jerusalem. So you have the tale of two cities. This is the one that ultimately, when the children of Israel, which is kind of a real weird reverse thing, when they wanted the gods of Babylon and they began to worship the heavens and the stars and all the paganism that Babylon was, the Lord goes, okay, you want that? Okay, I'm going to take you captive to go there. So he comes and disciplines his nation by taking them to Babylon. It's almost like, the parent that catches his kid smoking cigarettes and says, oh, you want to smoke cigarettes? Okay, we're going to smoke 5 packs. I'm going to sit here till you throw up or you do whatever. And then I never want to see a cigarette again. One of those things. You want idols? How about 70 years worth of idols? You want paganism? You want to live a life of full-blown porn saturation? Well, just go do it. See what you look like in 10 years. What's that life look like? What's it look like if you do that for 70 years? What's it look like when you take whatever Babylon offers you? Babylon is a system that brings sexual, sensual pleasure in various shapes and forms, and they're all counterfeit to what fulfills compared to the love, joy, and peace that God offers you in a relationship with Jesus. It's your choice. You just make that choice. These people are making that choice. They've already chosen to follow Nimrod. They've already chosen to rebel against God. And now they're going to build a monument. They're going to build a tower so that they can make a name for themselves. And that is going to go reach the very heavens so that they can worship anything else they can think of. It's interesting, isn't it, when people reject the true and living God, the biblical Judeo God of the Bible, they will believe anything after that. It's like once they reject the true, they are open to being duped by every single thing going down the pipe. They're going to go down the New Age road. Oh, I'm just going to need to meditate on my belly button. And you go, oh, what are you meditating on? Perfect nothingness. That's what nirvana is. It means nothingness. I already have nothingness. I need something more than nothingness. I don't have to search for nothingness. I got nothingness. Go in spades, I got nothingness. Doesn't matter which variety you choose. And these people and all of the false religions that are going to flow out of Babylon are found here in their ancient roots. There's a great, it's an old read, a historic read by a guy named by Hislop called The Two Babylons. I encourage you, if you were a student and you want to read and get some background on this, that the origins of things that come out of the Babylonian religion. But they've said, come let us make bricks. They have new technology. They didn't have the technology yet of cement, which seems that the Romans invented. But they had pitch, they had tar, and that's what they used for mortar. But now they say, come let us build that tower and let us make a name for ourselves. But they didn't want to be scattered. They wanted to be in urban centers. Are the largest cities in America the most moral? When we think of the heartland, why do we say like the heartland of America? Because the people that are in more rural areas, they're more God-fearing people. They're just because of the culture, and they're more family-oriented, and they're more moral in nature, and they have community with their neighbors, which creates, if you have a moral community of neighbors when you're growing up, the parents down the street, if you do something to offend them, they come talk to your parents. It's just like normal society. But when you go into urban centers, what happens is the degradation of people being in packed communities morally begin to decline. It doesn't mean good people don't live there. It doesn't mean saved people don't live there. But the sewage of those things morally is amplified, correct? I was going through a book recently about socialism, and it's called You'll Own Nothing, based upon the terminology of the Davos crowd with the European Economic Community. And they were saying that you can make a change in America and various things. They said you just need to give up on two things. Don't try to go fix the school board, and don't go try to fix an urban center. Now, I'm not sure that I agree with that, but I understand what they mean. The school boards now are so dictated by a pagan moral worldview from state government. You can be on the school board, but you can't turn the beast around. It's so hard. So you guys know how this works. When Christians came to America, the early founders, pilgrims, they started churches, and out of those churches, they started Christian schools, and out of those schools, from the churches, they also started hospitals. So where did all the Christian schools, where did Princeton, Harvard, Yale come from? They're all seminaries. Did you know that? They're preacher schools. But over time, is Harvard, Princeton, and Yale known for their godliness anymore? Do you know only 6% of Ivy League people graduate that are conservative? 6%. 94% are progressive leftists out of that. So the reality is that you go back to the roots. Out of God's people, we got to start Christian schools. We got to start a clinic so that we can get hydroxy next time, ivermectin next time, that they do Plandemic 25. It's almost like the Fast and the Furious 10, it's, here comes another one, Omicron .2. But the Lord had told them specifically, I can speak so strongly to this issue, that they did not want to scatter because they were afraid to obey God and just go do what he told them to do. Hey, I'm going to bless you. It took faith for them to trust God and to go out and to begin to settle communities and not be all packed together, because the Lord told them, he told them back in Genesis 1, but that was before the flood. He tells them in Genesis 9:1, God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The whole point was to go out, not stay in one spot. Now the plans of God prevail. Now the plans of man fail, but the plans of God prevail. In verse 5, it says, but the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, indeed the people are one, and they all have one language. And this is what they begin to do. Nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. What does he mean? The unity of their oneness of language, their advancement in technology, and where they could have been if God had not done what we're talking about right now, 5,000 years ago. We would have been at this place of AI technology way, 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 way back there. Because if you have unity of communication, you have unity of intellectual property, and you have unity of heart to rebel against God, everything can excel. So the Lord says, hey, they got one language, they're one people, and if they begin to do this in baby steps, imagine what they're going to be able to do. And so, they said, let us make bricks and let us build. The Lord says in verse 7, come, let us go down. I love that. They said, come, let us build this. The Lord goes, okay, come, let us go down and see what's going on. In verse 7, and there confuse their language that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. Now, Babel, in its original form, means the gate of the gods. That's what they were going for. Okay, the gate of the gods. Ziggurat, big building. We're going to worship the sun and moon and stars and all these things. And it's going to be the gateway of the gods as we rebel against God. But because this took place and God confused their language, the word Balal is very close in the Hebrew. Balal means confusion, and so it became synonymous, the confusion of Balal with Babel. If you ever hear somebody say a babbling idiot, it comes from this story. Babel means somebody's babbling to where you can't what? Understand them or distinguish what they're saying. And it also means a place of confusion, because imagine you're working on this massive project. It's Monday morning, and the Lord just says, hey, I'm going to change all these people's language. Boom! You ask for the hammer for the guy next to you, and he was speaking English. You ask for the hammer, and he turns around and speaks Japanese. I jokingly say, having traveled the world and been in a lot of countries, I'm always guessing with Asian people, the Japanese have kind of a staccato type of language. Now, you can't talk about these things anymore because it's considered racist or something, just to describe the differences of people's language. I'm just talking about language. I'm not trying to be offensive, okay? And so, well, that's a foregone conclusion. I'm already in. Okay, so, the Japanese language is like, and then I'm listening to somebody that's maybe from China area. It's going, it's almost like I'm not sure when they're done, right? It's just going on. But imagine you're in this workplace and now you turn around, you can't understand anybody. They can't understand you. You can't lift this brick. You can't lift this wall. You don't know what the temperature to turn that up. You have no way to communicate. And it says, the Lord confused their language, and the Lord scattered them all over the earth. The scattering of the languages made them move away into isolated groups that spoke their own languages, and we had the formation of what began, as I shared with you last week. There's 3,000 major languages of the earth, but there's about 100,000 people that have broken down almost another 4,000 languages, over 7,000 languages in the world. There's about 193 countries of the world to 196, depending on which week and if the civil war is going on and what happens. There's a couple of them that are in question according to the stats that you'll look up. I think there's 192 nations, a part of the United Nations. And where'd all that come from? At the United Nations, they all have headphones on. You got to have interpretation. You got to have interpretation. I went to this church in Israel, and it's at Eilat, which is a place that a lot of people go right on the tip of the Red Sea. And I was spending 4 days there. I was snorkeling. The Red Sea has, it's the third best place to snorkel in the world, if you didn't know it. And I'm snorkeling at the Red Sea, and I hear about this church. It's called The Shelter. So on Friday nights, it's not Friday nights, it's Thursday nights, they have this a lot of immigrants from all over Europe and Asia are working on these big hotels there, and they're really poor, but they're the labor force. So they give them free dinner on this night of the week. And as you come in, there's probably like 10 benches, just like this, 10 benches going through. And every bench is a nationality. So if this bench is, you speak Russian. This bench, you speak Chinese. This bench. And so there's an interpreter at the end of each bench, and they whisper the translation of what the speaker's speaking down every single bench all the way through. And then for Sabbath, on Shabbat, on Sunday, they do the same thing. And it's a home fellowship. There's only like 35 people there, but there's multiple languages and 35 people. And I just go sit on the couch because I don't know what to do. And the guy that's leading it, he's a Dutch pastor. He speaks 7 different languages. On Shabbat, he's going to preach in Hebrew. He spoke in English the other night. And he looked at me and he goes, "Do you speak Russian?" And I said, "No, I'm an American." He goes, "Well, you speak another language?" I said, "I speak English. I'm an American. I have no other languages. I apologize." Why am I'm sorry, I'm blowing all the mojo here. And he goes, "No, he said, you're sitting on the couch. That's the Russian section." He said, "I thought you looked like a pickle out of the jar. The English speakers are over there," because you're not going to get proper translation. But I can't imagine trying to do anything. I couldn't even sit on the right couch without getting myself in trouble. And so now they're scattered. Their languages take them all over the world, and all of these dialects that we have around the world. Where did all that come from? Did it come from cavemen scratching, their lithographs on cave walls and moving forward? No, it all happened right here. This is a major event that formed how the world is today. The Bible, in a microscopic way, in Genesis 1 through 11, gives you a worldview of the basics. If you understand them, it helps you view the world from God's perspective with his historical, authentic, accurate record. Now, his plan that prevails is not only to confuse what the rebels are doing, but it's also to bring, they got all the powerful people together. They all spoke one language. They all had a building project. They had new technology of kilns for bricks, and they were going to build something for themselves. A tower. God's plans work differently. He just starts with a couple. Starts with 2 people. That's what he does. God's answer to world problems oftentimes is the birth of a baby in Bethlehem, right? Or the birth of a baby by the name of Samuel, who becomes the prophet. Or the birth of a Boaz that comes along, Jesse, that Boaz and Ruth have. And it's now the genealogy of Shem that says in verse 10, this is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begot Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. Okay, so a couple of things are important. From verses 10 through 26, it's a whole bunch of names. We're only going to look at the first, a couple of thoughts, and at the end of the list. And I'm not going to torture you or myself with all the names in between. You can read them on your own just for a sedative at 10 o'clock at night to put you to sleep. But Shem was 100 years old, but he had his son was born when he was 100. Why is this important or significant? Because it says that he was born 2 years after that flood. So that means when Noah was called to build the ark, Shem wasn't even born. So 2 years after his dad started building the ark, he was born. And then it was probably till he wasn't 12, 15 that he could start helping with the ark. And then he did all of that work. But it's the only one we have some point of reference how old he was in that whole dynamic of his dad building the boat and to help him along those lines. So also in this list, then it says that he lived another 500 years. So he had a child, his firstborn son, at the age of 100. And then he lived another 500 years. So he lived 600 years. Now his dad, Noah, lived 950 years. So he just had 350 years cut off of his life. By the time we get to this list, the last guy in this list when we stop is going to be 148. So it goes from Noah, 950 years of age, Shem, 600 years of age, down to 148 years of age, as we see in verse 24. Nahor lived 29 years. Notice he wasn't having his first son at 100. He had his first son at 29 years and begot Terah. And he begot Terah. Nahor lived 119 years and begot sons and daughters. Now Terah lived 70 years and begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And so Nahor lived only 148 years. So the lifespan of man. So when Moses shows up, how long does Moses live? 120 years. And then Moses writes a psalm and says, you're going to live 70 to 80 years. What is the national average? It's went down now in America because of everything that's happened. There's 76 years of age. Anybody 76? Raise your hand. If you're 76 and above, God bless you guys. You are breaking all the averages. It's nice to defy the averages. So moving down to verse 27, this is the genealogy of Terah. We want to follow Shem. We want to go all the way down till we hit Terah. Terah is the father of Abraham because the rest of the book is going to be about who? Abram, who is going to become Abraham. So verse 27, this is the genealogy of Terah. Terah begot Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Haran begot Lot, and Haran died before his father Terah. So they had a brother. Abraham and Nahor's brother died. We don't know at what age, but Haran was his name. But he was old enough to have a son by the name of Lot. This is significant because Uncle Abraham adopts Lot and brings him along when he's going to go to the promised land. Verse 29, then Abraham and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. But Sarai was barren. She had no child. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, and the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, his son Abram's wife, and they went out with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. So the days of Terah were 205 years, so he lived longer than Nahor, which was 148 at 205, and Terah died in Haran. That wraps up this chapter, but why is it significant? Why does God's plans prevail? Nimrod's plan was to build this ziggurat to rebel against God, to start a whole cult of false worship. These things are not new. I was just talking to somebody that they planted a church. It's a mutual friend. I was talking to a mutual friend that recently talked to them, and they had this big Satan Con thing in Boston. If you've been following Satan Con, it's conferences that are starting to take off across the country. Even in our own backyard with the elementary school, we're starting good news clubs, which are basically Christian clubs at elementary schools here in our area. And because of that, now they want to start Satan clubs for children because we're coming in. They didn't have Satan clubs before we went, but now the Satan clubs want to come teach your children how to worship Satan. Nothing new under the sun. You have two approaches, right? You have loving God and satanic stuff. But our friend had just started a Calvary Chapel in Boston, right down the street, like a couple of blocks away. He had just started this church, rented the building, and a few blocks away they bring Satan Con to town. And they do things like, Christians like to do morally pure, like a father-daughter prom where they promise their purity to their husband-to-be or something like that. So we do a father-daughter thing that is impure. You're going to see body parts. There's going to be nakedness. There's going to be, they just go through this whole, gross thing. You're like, is this America? Is this happening down the street in your backyard? Who's going to let their kid? Imagine your third grader comes home. Hey, Mom and Dad, they're starting a new satanic club at my school. Can I go to the Satan club? We get little false horns. They don't have Mickey Mouse ears, but they got little horns. Sure, son, why not? Why? Because if those parents aren't walking with God, what do they care? Right? What do you care if you're not walking with God? Who are you serving? Everybody in this room is serving somebody. Everybody in the city is serving somebody. Bob Dylan sang it, right? Got to serve somebody. It might be the devil. It might be the Lord. But you got to serve somebody. I'm going to keep my day job. But that's the reality. Everybody, even if you're just serving yourself and your own ego, you're serving somebody. God chooses a family to intervene in their life and reveal himself to them. And so if we only had the Genesis record, we're going to get to chapter 12, the next message we have together in Genesis. But God's going to break into Abram's life. But Stephen, I'm so thankful for Stephen's sermon in Acts chapter 7 because he tells us what happened. In Acts chapter 7, verse 2 through 4, it says, brethren, he's preaching. Now, this is a sermon that really hits the nail on the head because they stoned him to death after it. The crowd didn't like this sermon very much. Brethren and fathers, listen, the God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran, and said to him, get out of your country and from your relatives and come to the land that I will show you. Then he came out of the land of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Haran, and from there, when his father was dead, he moved him to this land in which you now dwell. He says, the God of glory appeared to Abraham. Abraham is a pagan. Did you guys know this? At the age of 75, he's worshiped the moon god like everybody else. How do we know that? Joshua tells us that Terah, Abraham, his whole family, it says in Joshua 24:2, Joshua said to all the people, thus says the Lord God of Israel, your fathers, Abraham and Terah and all those, your fathers, including Terah, and the father of Abraham and the father of Nahor, dwelt on the other side of the river in old times. This is Mesopotamia. This is Ur of the Chaldees. And they served other gods. Who did they worship in Ur of the Chaldees? The moon god. Then I took your father Abraham from the other side of the river and led him throughout all the land of Canaan and multiplied his descendants and gave him Isaac. So Abraham, Terah, Nahor, the whole family, they worship the moon god. They're pagans. But God breaks into Abram's life. How was that? In a dream, in a vision? God just spoke to him? I don't know. The Lord showed up and spoke to me in my living room all alone at home. I had a supernatural moment where God spoke to me. I hadn't been going to church. I'm not hanging out with Christians. I don't know anything. And God rocked my world. I don't know what it was like for Abram, but the Lord said, hey, you get out of this country, you get away from your family, and you're going to go to a land I'm going to show you. This is Old Testament discipleship 101. Right? Repent, get out, get away from these people. They're pulling you down in your old lifestyle. They're pulling you down into the paganism. You're going to go walk with me. So he comes out. Now, the radical thing about the whole family here is each one of them responded some way. And we're going to wrap it up this way. Because you see, when God spoke to Abram, don't you know he came home and told his pop, Dad, I mean, they're pagans. They're open to anything, right? Dad, the God of heaven and earth, the God of glory spoke to me and said, I got to leave. I got to go to this place. He's going to show me. It's like a promised land. And he's going to give us this land as a family. And can you see his dad? When my mom came in, I'd been crying. I'd given my life to Jesus. She was coming from a bar scene because my mom played every weekend and bar bands and all kinds of stuff. So she comes in and I said, Mom, I'm saved. And she looked at me and she was so startled by my zealousness and seeing that I had been crying. And she's like, that's nice, honey. Not everybody knows how to respond about our zeal with Jesus, right? So Abraham tells his father, Terah. And Terah goes, let's check this out. I'll go with you, son. I'm still the patriarch of the family. So he insists to lead the way. Now, in that culture, you do what Dad says. God said to do what? Get out. Get away from your family. Right? Your dad's going to hold you back. Your brothers are going to hold you back. Anybody in your family holding you back? Don't let them hold you back. You have to press ahead. Jesus says, some people think I came to bring peace. I came to bring a sword. I divide a father against a son, a mother against a daughter. Some of you have sons and daughters. Some of you have moms and dads. Some of you have close lifetime friendships that when Jesus came into your life, a sword went between you and them, and they want nothing to do with you, right? And when that sword comes through and you feel it and you try to reach across and still hang on, that's very heartbreaking, isn't it? So Terah's the man that stopped. He goes, they leave Ur of the Chaldees. Dad's leading, Terah's leading. Well, I thought God spoke to Abram. Yeah, but Dad got in the U-Haul. I don't know what to do. Dad's got the steering wheel. Dad's got the map. Dad's one of those guys. He's a bulldozer. He's just like, well, just get in the back and shut up. Dad's in charge. We don't know how long they went. They only got down the road to Haran, and they stopped. Terah's the guy that stopped and probably looked at Abram and said, I know you say this, God says it's a lot further than this, but this is good enough, don't you think? We left Ur of the Chaldees. We're not down the street from the moon worshiping temple. Come on, this is far enough. And Terah just stopped, and Abram's trying to honor his dad. We don't know how long he's there, but he's like, okay, Pop, I heard God. I know what God told me to do, but Dad, I love you. I want to honor you. And it's not till his dad died that he finally was free to move ahead. Terah's the guy that heard about God, was willing to go so far and no farther, and he stopped. Some people are that way, right? They hear about God, they go so far. That's enough. Don't be taking this thing too radical. Don't be too in love with Jesus. I have people tell me those things. Like, you're just too radical. Have you ever read the book of Acts? I'm not even close to radical. I'm just doing normal Christianity. I just love Jesus. So Terah was the guy that stopped, but he slowed his servant Abram down. But his brother Nahor is the one that stayed. He never even came. Well, Abraham told him, hey, I got to get away from my family. And Nahor hears the story because you see, Abram knows, he's telling his testimony. God appeared to me. It'd be like you saying, hey, Jesus died for me on the cross, rose from the dead. I believe that by faith now. You sharing with your friends what Jesus has done in your life. That's the experience Abram had. But it was the God of glory. It's like, hey, God appeared to me. And he told me this is what we're going to do, to his brother Nahor. Now, there's nothing like your sibling. If you're close, I'm the youngest of four. The two older siblings, my brother Randy and my sister Shauna, were like really tight. And then we're the youngest, my brother Scotty and I, and we're really tight. And we would just like pit ourselves against each other, the younger against, and we had all out brawls and fights and things. But when I got saved, my greatest concern was my brother Scotty, because we're like this. So I tell him, I finally get the courage. He's my big brother. I'm the baby. He's my big brother. I tell him what Jesus did. I'm not going to tell you what my brother's nickname is for me because you'll attempt to use it. But even to this day, he uses it. And he's taken a lot of beatings for me in my life, so he can say it. If anybody else says it, I'll beat them. But my brother says, I committed my life to Jesus about 5 months ago. And he hadn't told me. And I'm, what are you doing? I said, because I thought he'd been acting really weird from a pagan's perspective. But now we're on the same page. And our first conversation sounded like this. I gave my life to Jesus. I committed my life. And my first question was, how in the world do you talk when you're a Christian? Because every other word in my vocabulary was the F word. It's like I only have one adjective. It's bizarre. And so my brother's like, I don't know, I've been trying to figure it out too. But there was another guy that was about 15 years older than us, and he was a strong Catholic, and he was trying to clean up his mouth, so he'd say, golly gee whiz. And we were mocking him to no end behind his back. His name was Johnny. Like, Johnny, golly gee whiz. And I said, well, Johnny's trying it. Let's just be the jolly good gee whiz guy. So my brother and I, we started to be the golly gee whiz people. Then we met some people that were Christians, very strong Christians. We're young Christians. And they said, well, that's called shoot cussing. I said, what's shoot cussing? And it means, well, you're just using different words than the bad ones. I said, if you heard me before, you would be glad that I'm saying golly gee whiz, folks. And these people were really trying to sanctify me quick. I had only been a Christian a few months. I said, hey, man, they were putting the pressure on me hard. I said, hey, man, I'm just trying to get through the week without getting drunk or ending up in bed with a strange girl, and you're worried about my language? Back off. Trying to grow in this thing one day at a time in Jesus. Sanctification takes some time. Be patient with people that are just coming to Jesus. Don't be, dropping the hammer on them. They've been saved 6 months. They should know Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. I was like, back off. Just relax. Just give them time, right? You don't expect a newborn infant to start running and catching a football. They got to have time until they crawl and they walk and all those things. So his brother Nahor says, he stays. He's like, no. See you later. Bro, I'm glad you fell in love with Jesus. You got into those family members. That's good for you. That's good for you. I'm glad that you've found God. But I'm good here worshiping the moon god. Just leave me alone. So Nahor stays. Terah went so far and stopped. But then Lot comes all the way, the nephew Lot. But Lot strayed and went to Sodom. First, he looked towards Sodom and saw it was a well-watered plain. It was progressive. He looked towards it. Then he went and pitched his tent towards it. And then he was in the city gate as one of their leaders of a homosexual dominated culture. And it was bad news. He continued to walk with God. He continued to try to be a witness to these guys. And they told him, from the time this guy came here, he's been trying to be a judge. He's been trying to tell us about our morals, that they're wrong. It tells us righteous Lot was vexed in his soul every day by living there. Lot was one of those families that he only had daughters. He had multiple daughters. And so when the angels were going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, he went to his two son-in-laws. Well, it doesn't say, it just uses plural. We know there's at least two. He went to his son-in-laws and said, hey guys, the Lord sent these angels. They're going to destroy the city tomorrow. We got to get out of here. Come on. And they laughed at him as if he was they mocked him like he was some jokester. So the angels finally had to take him by the hand, his wife by the hand, and his two daughters by the hand and drag him out of the city because they couldn't destroy the city till they got out. But even his wife had been so influenced by the immorality of Sodom, it says that she turned around to go back. The angels had told them, don't look back. It wasn't that she just looked over her shoulder to see the destruction. She looked back and took steps to go back. She's like, you know what? I'm not doing this. I like this culture. I like the Babylon here. It attracts me. The lust of it attracts me. The sensuality of it attracts me. I like it. I want this. And she made her choice, and she turned to a pillar of salt in the judgment of God. The two daughters were influenced also. As they get away, they think all the men of the earth are dead. The older daughter says to the younger daughter, hey, you know what? There's no men left. They think it was a localized judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. Fire and brimstone destroyed them all. But they didn't know that. They thought all mankind were gone. So they thought, hey, we're not going to have any children. So let's get dad drunk. The oldest said, let's get dad drunk, and then I'll have sex with him tonight, and I'll get pregnant. And in the morning it says that Lot didn't know whether she got in or got out of bed because he was just so hammered. And then she told her little sister the next day, hey, you get dad drunk, and now you go to bed with him. And they both were impregnated by their father while he was drunk, out of his mind drunk. And it says he didn't even know when he woke up in the morning what had happened. Do you think those two daughters were influenced by Sodom and Gomorrah? Can we send our kids to a public school that crams transgender down their throat, that they have all of this pressure, social pressure of homosexuality, and then have them come back and be normal? Can you send your kids to Rome all day and then have them come back and not be Romans? No. Lot is the guy that strayed, though Lot really seemed to be the only one that could maintain his godliness in the midst of a Babylon and not give in, but he lost all his family. The two sons that were born to his two daughters were Ammon and Moab, and the Ammonites and the Moabites became arch enemies of the people of Israel for the rest of their life. In this tale, we see how people responded when the God of glory appeared to somebody and they shared their witness with their family. Some of your family got saved when you shared Jesus with them. Some of my family did. We've been praying for years for our family. Most of them have come to Christ. And those who haven't come to Christ at least are tolerant of us when we come around. But we've been praying for them. And it's not over till it's over, right? Till their last breath, whatever might take place. But Abram was the one that obeyed. He heard God's voice. He went and, his dad slowed him down for a while in his walk with God. No doubt his brother Nahor pulled on him to say, stay. He took Lot along, and eventually they're going to have to part ways in chapter 13, and he's going to have to go over here to Sodom and Gomorrah. They have to get apart from each other. And it's not until Abraham finally gets alone and Lot leaves. Lot's name means veiled or covered. And as soon as God finally gets Abraham to the place of sanctification, he's put his brother behind, he's put his dad behind, now he's put his nephew behind. Now God said, now I can do all that I want to do in your life, Abram. Now. because you're finally standing free before me without all these influences of your family pulling you back into the Babylon of your life. And he says, he goes, you look to the north, you look to the south, you look to the east, you west, all this land, it's all yours. That last family member had to get out of the perspective of Abram's life to see all that God had for him. And sometimes people are veiling and blocking all that God wants to do in your life because you're more concerned with them, you're more concerned with this friend, with a brother, with a father, with a classmate, with a teammate, with a neighbor, with a coworker. You're more